Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be talking about the series American Anthems with musicians and songwriters from the show, Lindsay Ell and Kristian Bush. And Lindsay, I wanted to start with a question for you in terms of just the setup and the scope of the show, because it's this really beautiful episode where you have a woman called Greta that you're coming in and essentially writing a song for, and then you brought Kristian into the mix from being a longtime collaborator with him. But I was interested, beyond the scope of the producers obviously telling you, we're going to connect you with someone, you're going to talk to them, get to know them a little bit, you're going to end up writing a song. Kind of what were some of the pertinent details that were really important to know? Because it's also coming onto this show and really folding in your songwriting process, and us getting to see behind the scenes and connecting with Greta creatively. So there's a lot of different elements to it. So I was just interested in what some of those early discussions were, or what was helpful for you to know coming into this process.
Yeah, well, anything that connects art to human beings and helps us understand each other better, I'm all the way in. Sign me up. And when I heard PBS was doing this show, American Anthems, and then got to learn a little bit more about it, I thought it was just such a refreshing thing that we can watch on TV. So much of TV, is about drama and all of these other feelings that are hard to feel, but American Anthem just makes you feel so good when you watch it. And it's just such a brilliant concept to take an artist and pair them up with a hero from any walk of life, from a completely different backgrounds. Like every episode features a different hero, and the hero I got teamed up with, her name is Greta McLean, and she's just this incredible woman. Was a retired police officer. She worked in the sexual harassment unit. And a few years after she retired, she actually got attacked and raped herself, which was a horrible thing. And yet has taken her life and dedicated it to starting a nonprofit called Silent No Longer and helping be an advocate for survivors and to connect survivors to other healing. And of course, the producers at American Anthems wanted to team up each artist with each hero and have some sort of similarity within their stories. And I am a survivor, and I talked about it on my last record. I wrote a song about it. I started my own foundation as well to just give awareness and support for other survivors out there and be an advocate to them. And so there was so much common ground between Greta and I. From the minute we walked into the room together, cameras were rolling, and I just felt like I knew her. A lot of the things that she experienced and had gone through, I completely understood from a very hands-on experience. And so I fell in love with her from day one, from minute one. And our meeting, our first initial meeting, and the day we got to spend together was all on camera from the get-go. And I just think that's such a special moment to be able to really learn about someone through their story and feel just so connected to that. And then the coolest part of the show is at the end, Greta knew that I was going to play a show for some of her and her friends. But what she didn't know was that I was going to write a song for her about her story. And of course, who's the first person I think of whenever I need to write a song that is on camera about something challenging to write about, and just you need to do it within a matter of hours. I was like, Kristian Bush, I need to call up KB. So I was like, hey, KB, will you come on air on TV and write a song when the cameras are rolling about kind of a difficult topic? And of course, because he's just the magic man himself, he was like, yes, I'm in. And so you can see on the episode that we got together and wrote a song for Greta on camera. And then the best part of it was got to present it to her in front of her friends, got to surprise her with it. She was crying. It was just such a beautiful moment.
It really is, and speaking of what Lindsay was just saying, Kristian, in terms of your involvement and coming in, obviously as a songwriter, there's times where you're writing something that is going to be a song for you, you're collaborating with someone, and kind of sitting in the room with them. But for this experience, it was writing a song that needed to have that incredibly personal intimacy to it, especially with the subject matter of what it's about. But you weren't actually in the room with Greta. You kind of were having details relayed to you by Lindsay. And so what was that experience for you in terms of the space that put you in creatively and creating something that really captured that intimacy and that personal element for Greta's story, but not necessarily getting to sit down and have a conversation and spend the day with her the same way that Lindsay did, especially at the time constraints of essentially writing a song in a few hours?
Well, when faced with a challenge like this, uh, one of the things that you depend on with your collaborator is direction, right? And Lindsay had absorbed, and she's an empath, so she's absorbing not just what Greta's saying, but all of the little movements and who she is. And so when I started to essentially quiz Lindsay on, hey, so what is she like over here? And do you get the feeling that this? I was more interested in the intersection of the sort of the Venn diagram of both of their experiences more than I was walking around blind because I hadn't met this woman. And I think there's an advantage to that situation in that, the job is to tell one person's story in a way that a stranger would connect with it. And I'm a stranger to the whole thing. So by design, weirdly, we're set up to succeed as long as Lindsay and I trust each other and can write something in 2 hours and play it 2 hours after that.
Exactly.
I mean, I really loved as well that we got to see such a window into the process between the two of you, and especially with the fact that, Kristian produced your first album, Lindsay. You said you've been bandmates, you've toured together, you've written songs together. So there really is this extensive history, and going into a process like this where it was up against such a tight deadline, I even love seeing like the Google Doc that you guys had in terms of like just writing everything down and not being precious about it. And so wanted to ask a little bit about that part of the process where it's really important when you're trying to write something and you really are up against a time constraint like this to not be precious about ideas, because sometimes an idea that isn't the right idea might get you to the right place, and how that really helped you to open up the way that you were writing this song in particular.
Absolutely. I think that is the true ticket to any creativity, regardless of where you apply it. And I have a lot of that to thank Kristian for, even before we went into the studio to record my first album, he was really schooling me on that very thing, that it's in the notion of allowing yourself to create and experiment wherever that may take you. Kristian was the mastermind behind me recording my favorite record of all time, Continuum by John Mayer. And then like years later, we ended up releasing that because fans wanted to hear it, which is something I never thought was going to see the light of day. And yet that was the project that got us in the right headspace to go record my first album. And so yeah, if we're looking of how I've learned how to be creative and how I've let myself walk into that space of experimentation where anything is possible, a lot of that is thanks to Kristian Bush.
And Kristian, especially having known Lindsay throughout the entire scope of her career and having worked with her so early on, when you were sitting working with her on this particular song for this project, kind of what are some of the ways in which you can just kind of sit there and watch her work and watch her creativity and really see the way that she's grown and evolved as an artist and a storyteller over the years?
Sure. I would say the thing about Lindsay, and I will try not to embarrass you too much, that is a hallmark of all success is her dogged determination, really, to go continue even when she's tired to create again. And what you learn from that experience is how to trust yourself. And it's a very difficult thing in this business because the further you get in it, strangely, the less you trust yourself. Like early on, you trust yourself a whole lot more. It's one of the reasons I was, when we were looking for direction, I was like, go back to the last time you knew which way the compass was pointing. And she was like, oh, I know that record. That was this record. I loved this John Mayer record. I was like, well, let's go do that. And then it's like you're carrying a compass around, right? So the further you get down this kind of track in making things and also becoming a person that is not only telling your own story, but you're absorbing the stories of everyone around you in your audience, in your fans interaction, in your world of writing. Lindsay going into a situation like this, I would have complete confidence. She didn't really need me, but I can speed it up because I will continuously say yes. And that's what you need in your partner. You want to say, I talk about it in acting a lot. it's yes and, right? When you're doing improv. And when you're writing, there's so much weird black magic in it because you're not sure how you're writing it, but you're kind of convinced that maybe this is the right word or this is the right melody. And if you have anyone around you that says, I don't know, well, now everything slows down, right? And both of us were able to say, ooh, I like that. What about this? And it was just a language that we've developed over the years, even though we don't write together all the time, that I would trust her producing my record now as much as she trusted me producing hers in the past. And you learn that over time.
That's amazing. And we see some of that in terms of just the ideas that kind of crack open as you're going through the process of writing this song. Like there's the moment where you cotton on to let the words come out as like such a pivotal line of the song. And it really feels like that moment really opened up lyrically where you both saw the song going. And so when you landed on that particular line for both of you, how did that kind of change the moment and give you a really clear direction in terms of where you wanted this piece to go?
I think it's the magic in any songwriting session when you like really figure out what you're talking about. Like, I know that sounds okay, yeah, that's obvious, but every songwriting session is so different. Sometimes you're like starting from the verse, and sometimes you're writing it backwards, and sometimes you start with the hook and the chorus and then write it out. And every writing session is so different. And so it's that magical moment where you're like, yeah, that's it. Whether that happens in the first minute or the 5 hours later. And thankfully, when we were talking about Greta and her story, and her organization is called Silent No Longer, and we were just talking about how amazing it is when you can give power to your own story, whatever that may be, how impactful it can be to another human being, whether you're talking to two people or a whole crowd of thousands of people. And I'm pretty sure it was Kristian Bush who was like, what if we said, let the words come out? Like, let your story come out. If you find that courage within yourself, that is where the magic is. And the minute he said, let the words come out, I'm like, that's it. That's it. It's perfect. It is so applicable, not only to Greta's story, but to anyone listening to this. They can hear it and be like, oh yeah, I connect to what that is.
So songs are really interesting. I say this a lot, especially I think I remember saying it that day, is you have to ask yourself the question, what is this song giving the listener permission to do? And if you'll constantly ask that question, your song turns out to have more effect than you would have previously thought, because now you're intentionally thinking about, well, it's giving me permission to, depending on the kind of song, have a beer when I'm feeling down, or, turn the music up louder. It could be that simple, but you do have to ask yourself that question. And in this kind of topic, in this kind of collaboration, that question gave us this answer.
I also think one of the things that's so impressive about what you wrote in this particular song together is the scope of that conversation and what you're exploring in the song. And I think you both make the point in the episode about you really don't have that much space. By the time you have the bridge and the chorus, there's very little space in terms of the verses to explore that. And so particularly sitting in front of a subject matter like this and wanting to create this really large dialogue with lyrics, how do you navigate narrowing down the space of what are going to be the really succinct lyrics that are going to capture everything that we really want to convey, what we want to give the audience permission for, how we want them to feel by the end of the song?
I mean, I'll let KB answer this as well, but I just know as a writer, you kind of get this gut instinct of like, oh yeah, that's it. Like it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like archaically constructed. It just feels natural, and my favorite songwriters are songs that you can just read the lyrics as a conversation. And when it says it so universally, I mean, Kristian Bush is the king of universal songs. Let's just be real. But when you can say something so universally that it applies to your situation, it applies to maybe what you're writing about, and yet it applies to the world, that's like, okay, this is one of the 36 lines of our song.
I love it. I love all of that. I was I tell my friends all the time that are like writers, like novelists and things. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's cool. That's a great story. Can you do it in 70 words and 20 of them
Yeah.
repeat 3 times? You know,
Yeah.
like, so there's magic in it that you don't really understand. But one of the things that Lindsay and I agree on, and we come from a similar school, is um, be very aware of when you've overspoken or you've overtalked or you overwrote it. You know, can you do the same thing with less? It's like the old Benjamin Franklin, I would have written a shorter letter if I'd have had the time.
That's so great. And going back, Lindsay, as well, to some of the time that you spent with Greta for the show, you know, it was really beautiful watching the two of you just get to know each other, but also even when you're engaging in creating pottery, and this isn't an art form that either of you are excelling at or have experience in. And so just that neutral space that we're both coming into this, neither of us really know what we're doing, but we're going to dive head first, was really lovely to watch. How do you feel like even just the act of doing something very simple like that, completely unrelated to writing a song, really helped when it came to sitting in the studio with Kristian and finding how you wanted to open everything up based on that time that you'd spent? Because it's also about, you know, just getting to know her energy and charisma as well as details of her life.
Yeah, so beautifully said. I think art is such an incredible tool because it really helps us tap into that vulnerability. Um, and you know, when you're walking into a situation of something you've never done before, and you can do it with a friend, and you're both jumping into something that you've never done before, it's like all bets are off the table, all egos are off the table. Like you just let go of your pride and you're just in it, man. And you get this like new form of bravery from it because you're like, well, yeah, I've never done this before. Well, she's never done it before either. And you know, I fell in love with pottery that day. There's something so magical about like, I am terrible at it. I will say this, but hey, you only get better at things by doing them more often. But there's something so magical about like forming this piece of clay in your hands while it's on a wheel. You feel like you're just so empowered, like you're using your body to like move it around and like form this beautiful thing that you want to make. And it is such an amazing form of art. Like pottery is just so beautiful and so metaphorical in so many ways. And so I was really grateful to be able to do that with Greta that day and on the episode. And she is a killer I don't pottery maker, is that what you call them? She's awesome at it. I have a lot of work to do.
And there's also a moment where you kind of handed her over one of your guitars and were teaching her a little bit, you know, and as you mentioned earlier, she didn't necessarily know that you were going to walk away and write a song that you were going to share with her the next day. So for you, was that just about sharing your kind of window into creativity and something that's really helped you as a form of therapy through art? Or was that somewhat as well kind of like bringing her into the process a little bit, even though she didn't know that was where things were going yet?
She had mentioned that you know, she played a little bit of guitar and she wanted to get better and learn a few things. And I was like, well, I have a guitar in my car. Like let's whip this thing out. Let's talk about it. And so she was just so grateful and such a humble human being and so willing to learn. That's one thing I really get inspired right now with just meeting new friends or old friends and just being able to level with someone who's just open to expand their mind, whatever that may be about, is just amazing to be around. That is incredible energy to be around because you know, you never know everything and there's so much to learn every single day of our lives. And it's just really inspiring being around that kind of energy. And Greta's willingness to just pick up a guitar and be like, okay, show me things was pretty cool.
I love that. And Kristian, coming back to some of the work in the studio a little bit again, there's a moment where you were describing how for you, one of the things that you always do in writing a song is look at the last line of the bridge, the last line of the chorus, and then the first line of the song. And I loved that detail. And so wanted to ask a little bit about how that became a really necessary component to any song that you're working on and how that really opens up the songwriting process in figuring out some of the things that you're still trying to piece together a little bit in the rest of the song.
Really, song math is really what you're asking about, and everybody adds it up differently. For me, I enjoy songs that like the first couple of lines tell me everything I'm supposed to get, you know. But I like to work cross-vocationally. So people that are in the storytelling world that write scripts and write movies and things, they say, tell me what you're going to tell me, then tell me you just told me. Right? And it sounds redundant and silly. But in many ways, that's how successful movies are written. And mainly because I think it's because humans like repetition. Like when it's said more than once, we think to ourselves, wow, is that important? Are they repeating it because I'm supposed to get it? Or I didn't get it? Or is there something more to it that I don't know? And I kind of love that weird, I don't know, science of the way your brain processes things. So that's why I like to talk about that in a song, especially when, like, Lindsay is a wonderful combination, or you, Lindsay, are a wonderful combination of writing in your mind and writing in your heart. And you let them kind of battle each other out sometimes. You know, it's like a fight to the death. And small little details like, is our first line doing what it's supposed to? And is our last line of the bridge giving us a new way to, oh my gosh, I need to go listen to the whole song again because I just found out something, you know, like, is it giving you the kind of calories that a song like this requires that you're consuming? Because what you really don't want to do is take a topic like this and be shallow about it. That would not really, I don't know, it wouldn't honor your listener, nor would it honor your subject. You know, so as a collaborator, part of my job is to constantly turn back to Lindsay and say, what do you think about this through this lens or that lens?
And off the back of that for you, Lindsay, you know, with that idea of song math, is there anything in particular that you tend to try and hone in on, or a particular space in a song when you're trying to answer a creative question somewhere else in the song that really helps you in terms of just finding the path through?
Yeah, I mean, I think Christian said it so beautifully. It is truly like song math, and it is about finding that space where you just aren't editing yourself in the process. You're just trying to write, you know, even if you write 5 verses and then you pick the best 2 or 3 or whichever ones make the cut. I think that just making sure you have that flow, and then being able to, like KB said, when you finish the song, okay, is their song really saying what it needs to? I also like kind of going through the exercise, you know, can every line point back to the hook or your title, or can it be answered from the hook, you know, from the first line? Can that go into let the words come out? Second line, can that go into let the words come out? You know, I think it's always so important to make sure you're coming back to the point of why you sat down to write this thing in the first place.
Yeah. And you were also touching before upon Heart Theory, which was an incredibly personal piece of writing for you. How do you feel like writing that for yourself really opened up some of the spaces that lyrically or musically you found yourself going on this particular piece? Because, you know, this was a song that you wrote for Greta, but also something that you really bought so much of yourself into as well.
Yeah, I think writing Heart Theory as an album let me give myself permission to go to some darker places that I was just too scared to go before. And I think as writers, as creators, when we allow ourselves to like peel a few layers of the onion off, you get like a fresh, beautiful onion that then you get to, you know, play with and write songs from. And that's just a beautifully daring place to be as a songwriter. And I think that walking into this song right with Greta, because I did write a song about my story before, it was a really challenging topic. I mean, it's a difficult topic to talk about sexual harassment in a song. Goodness gracious, let alone on a TV show. Like, good luck, man. I mean, try making that like relatable and easy to listen to and want to sing along with. It's like, okay, where are we going to start here? But again, I just think it's the magical thing about music is, and art, if you lean into it, it will show you the way.
Absolutely. And it's really lovely watching the performance in the show as well, and the way that you're connecting to Greta and to the rest of the audience who have such a connection to that song as you're performing it. And obviously, you know, you've both played so many different scopes in terms of spaces and venues and audiences. And what were some of the unique aspects of this, or some of the elements of the intimacy of the performance that you wanted to make sure to bring into that moment when you were finally performing it on camera for Greta?
My biggest thing was I just wanted her to connect to the song, you know, and I wanted her to, it's like a very fragile thing when you take someone's story and you want to package it into like a little box of a 3.5-minute song and be like, here you go. And so I just really wanted her to connect to the lyrics we wrote, and also not forget any lyrics, because we wrote it 2 hours prior to us singing it. So I was like, oh gosh. But I was just really excited for her to see it and to, you know, finally get brought in on the surprise. And I think she really liked it.
Yeah. And for you, Kristian?
I have had the odd experience of having a friend of mine surprise me with a song about me before. And it is a very emotional experience. I still listen to it on a record. It's called Christian Song, and it freaks me out every time I hear it. And I now know, thinking back to when my friend wrote it about me, what was happening in my life and what he was seeing and what he was telling the story of. And so when I'm in a moment, and thank goodness it was with Lindsay. I can't imagine doing something like this alone. But I had a lot of empathy for maybe what she might be walking into. So there was just hey, we got you, even if you're falling apart, because you're going to fall apart. And it's exactly what Greta her story's all about, is the same thing that it's very much what Lindsay's about, which is it's not about, the music's not about me, it's about you, it's about the listener. It's not about me, the maker. You know, we're just kind of in the story to help the story come out, like the words. And the song says what it's trying to get you to do. It's almost, there's not a word for it, but it's almost onomatopoetic in a song form. And because of that, there's just so much joy in the moment where we performed it. But also, you know, I listen back to the recording of it now and I can hear that, geez, I don't hear us being as nervous as we were.
Agreed. KB, agreed.
And I just, it sounds so much better than I thought. Like, I thought we had kind of clammed it, a lot of it. And we didn't. And we had one chance, you know? And that's just a testament to everything that Lindsay Ell is as a performer and a writer, but also to the courage of kind of what you were talking about with pottery, and the courage that the filmmaker had and that the director had, and that the people that dreamed this whole thing up had. You know, like, you don't always land on your feet, and that's completely fine. That doesn't mean you don't try, but they tried with this episode, and I can't believe it worked. It's so satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an incredible concept for a series, and it's a really beautiful song that the two of you wrote up against incredible constraints in terms of how much time you had to write the song, and like you said, having to perform it a couple of hours after you finished it. So it's been so wonderful to hear so much in terms of the details that went into that. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kristian and Lindsay.
Thank you so much for wanting to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you.